Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming today and joining me. My name is Jessica Visinski. I'm a child nutrition specialist on the school team, and I've been working with CEP as a focus area for about 3 years. I hope that I've met or spoken to all of you in the past, but if not, I'm pleased to meet you in our virtual space today. For those of you that haven't met me in person, I've added a nice little picture so you know who you're chatting with. This is what I look like most of the year, but when April rolls around and CEP Madness begins, it's a bit more like this. And I am sure that all of you can relate. So that's why we're here today. This is my first time attempting a question and answer format, so please bear with me if I have technical difficulties. We'll work through this together. I've gone ahead and muted all the lines to start with the call to eliminate background noise. If you're calling in on a phone, if you can just make sure that you're muted on your end as well, that would be great. I want to first provide a little bit of background information. All of the attendees on the call this morning are sponsors who are completing year 4 of the CEP cycle and are either attempting to elect a new cycle or transitioning to a different means of counting and claiming. And so that's what we want to talk about today. If you attended the CEP session at OSNA, there may be a little bit of review as I answer some of the most common questions received. I will go over what the options are for sponsors in year 4, definitely discuss the grace year option, and review the website and required documents for electing a new ISP. While I'm going over some of the basic CEP information and throughout the call, please feel free to submit questions by using the chat feature located at the right-hand corner of your screen. I believe you can choose to submit your question to only the organizer, which is me, or to everyone. I will try to address as many questions as possible today, but I'll also make sure to supply answers to all questions that we receive in a follow-up email. Okay, so with that taken care of, let's go ahead and talk about the CEP webpage. Okay, so to get to the CEP webpage, you want to enter www.oregon.gov/ODE. Then you'll be taken to the ODE main page. And as you scroll down under Students and Family, you'll select Child Nutrition Programs. And scrolling down again, School Nutrition Programs. And then under S&P Resources, you'll see the third option is Community Eligibility Provision. So that will take us to our CEP page. We've made some updates to the page this year to try and provide you with as much information as we can in one location. So we'll start a little bit of a virtual tour. We do have CEP trainings. You'll click here on the page to take you to the S&P training page. Our trainings will give you basics of CEP, but also we have a step-by-step training that will take you through the election process, show you how to use the ODE match tool, and explain all of the documentation that needs to be submitted to ODE to elect CEP. Lower on the page, you'll see that the website is divided into 3 columns. The first column is basically, am I eligible for CEP? The second column is, what do I do if I want to elect CEP? And then the third column is information about renewing CEP if you're already in the cycle, or if you decide to discontinue CEP, what you can do, either electing a different provision, Provision 2, or moving on to standard counting and claiming. For all of you, you'll probably focus on the second and third columns for this year. So let's move on to a couple of our most common questions that we receive either through email or things that I've talked to people about on the phone. I'm going to go ahead and go back, or try to go back to our slideshow to review those questions. Okay, oops, that's the wrong way. Bear with me. Okay. So some of the common questions that we've received. First, I'm a sponsor and I'm in year 4 of my CEP cycle, and what are my options? The 3 basic options, as I mentioned, at the end of year 4 of your CEP cycle is to elect a new CEP cycle, elect a grace year of your current CEP cycle, or discontinue CEP and switch to a different counting and claiming method. Many of you have asked what a grace year entails. The grace year is something that's definitely confusing, not just for sponsors, but for us as well. But USDA has said that the grace year is a 1-year continuation of the current CEP cycle for a site, group, or district when the ISP percentage determined is below the required 40% to elect a new cycle, but above 30%. Unfortunately, when they say continuation of the cycle, it doesn't necessarily mean a continuation of the current free claiming percentage. If a sponsor chooses to elect a grace year, the free claiming percentage will be based on the lower determined ISP. So for example, if a group calculates a new ISP of 35% and wants to elect a grace year, the free claiming percentage for that year will be 56%, and the remainder will be reimbursed at the paid rate. As a follow-up to the grace year question, we have had questions about whether a sponsor can split a group if a few of the schools are above the 40% threshold to elect a new cycle and others are below the threshold. For instance, we have a scenario if a group consisting of 3 schools determines their current ISPs. School A is 45%, School B is 40%, and School C is 31%. The question is whether the sponsor can elect a grace year for School C and elect a new 4-year cycle for Schools A and B. Unfortunately, USDA says no. The intent of the grace year is to provide an extension to the current sites, groups, or districts in the same configuration as elected. So in this scenario, the sponsor would either determine to elect a grace year for the entire group or to elect a new CEP cycle for schools A and B and discontinue CEP for School C. We've also received questions about what a sponsor needs to send to ODE to elect a new cycle or a grace year. No matter what you do this year, you do need to send information to ODE to move forward with the process. If you choose to discontinue CEP altogether or move to Provision 2, please connect with either me to let me know or your child nutrition specialist. And ensure that you've indicated the change in your site information sheets during your renewal. If you haven't decided what you're doing, you can continue with your site information sheets in the renewal process as they are, and we can make changes later. If you plan to elect a new cycle or a grace year, ODE requires that you provide the following information. I'm going to go back to our website so we can take a look at that. Okay. So you must provide the CEP election spreadsheet, which lays out your ISPs and the groups that students are in to determine that number. You must submit a new CEP sponsor agreement. And then you need to provide all of the backup documentation used to create your identified student percentage. This can include direct certification lists, migrant, homeless, or foster lists provided to you by a liaison of these programs, Head Start rosters, tribal letters verifying FDPIR participation, or screenshots of extended benefits. There's definitely other information that you can include, but those are the most common. I know this seems like a lot of work and a lot of information, but 2 years ago, USDA submitted a memo that stated that state agencies must validate all identified student percentages and ensure that all backup documentation is received and saved for 3 years plus the current year after the end of the cycle. Okay, now those are the most common questions, but I definitely want to know the specific questions that all of you have. So I'm going to go ahead and mute the line. Please remember that you can submit questions through the chat feature, which should be located on the right hand of your screen. I'll mute the line, and as we receive questions, I'll go ahead and answer those as best I can. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks. Okay, we've received a couple of questions, so I'll go ahead and get started. The first question is whether pre-K students can be included in the ISP. And the answer is, if pre-K students are enrolled in the school or district and are receiving meals, either breakfast or lunch, or both, they may be included and must be included in the total enrollment and in the ISP. For Head Start programs, Head Start is a program that caters to or provides for low socioeconomic students. And so all you need to provide for those students as backup documentation is the Head Start roster. For traditional pre-K programs or preschool promise programs, you will need to determine the eligibility of each specific student as you would any other K through 12 student. So basically, they may be included as long as they're enrolled in receiving meals. The next question, when do we need to have this information ready? So the information as far as the election spreadsheet and any backup documentation must be submitted to ODE by June 30th of 2018. So you have some time to determine your ISP and gather that information. Once you submit the information by June 30th, then we'll go ahead and validate that information. I will tell you that gathering the information takes time and validating the information takes time. So once you submit it, if you haven't heard from us for a few days or maybe a couple weeks, just know that we're working on validating that information. You can always connect with us to see where we are in the process. But bottom line, information is due by June 30th. Next question is, can we submit our renewal for NSLP before we have our CEP information? The answer to that is yes. Go ahead and submit your sponsor information sheets, site information sheets, and other offline documents. The due date for renewal of NSLP was this week, April 30th. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, whether you're going with CEP or another program, go ahead and renew your site information sheets with the information you had from last year for those programs. And once you decide and we validate the program you're going to go on with, we'll go ahead and have you revise those and approve them. Okay, so I'm going to mute the line again to gather up more questions, and I will be right back. We've gotten several questions, so thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and try to summarize some of the questions that are a little bit longer. So sponsors were able to use the April 8th direct certification file from the match site this year. The first download of the month was not a full download as it usually is. It was a partial download. So schools are able to use that 4-8 DC list to determine their ISP or their directly certified students. If a student withdrew on April 8th, you may still use that student because they were most likely on your April 2nd enrollment, which is the snapshot that you're using to determine your total enrollment and then to match to your direct certification list. So if you're using that April 8th list and the student withdrew on that same day, you can still use them as part of your total enrollment and your ISP. There's a question about returning to free and reduced traditional counting and claiming. So we call it standard counting and claiming. And whether sponsors that have done this in the past have received negative pushback from families. And the honest answer is yes. But I think that in some cases, the most important thing to help families to understand the program and the reasons why the school is returning to standard counting and claiming is clear communication. So if that is the step that sponsors need to take or that a school needs to take, I would say definitely start communicating with families now. Communicate with administration and staff to help them understand the program, and that there's a pretty steep eligibility piece that you have to be able to elect the program. The hardest part for families is that they don't realize that, unfortunately, we have a double-edged sword in that our income levels in the state are rising, which is great for some, but that pushes the ability for schools to participate in some of these programs down. And so I would say definitely communicate with families. You may consider a provision 2 option, even just for breakfast, to help them and to provide a little bit of good PR in the sense that you're providing breakfast at no charge, but we'll have to continue or move to a standard counting and claiming for lunch. So it's not an easy answer, but anything that we can do to help at ODE, we will definitely try to do. The next question is, I have a school in year 2 of the CEP cycle. Do I need to do anything for that school? The only thing you need to do for schools that are currently in their 4-year cycle, either years 2 or 3, is to submit the CEP annual evaluation form, which is basically the renewal form. Oops. Let me see if I can pull it up for all of you, possibly. Here's where that technical difficulty comes in. Okay, let's see. Oh, how do I do that? Okay, there we have it. So the CEP annual evaluation form you will find on your packet tab in CNP Web. If you're continuing with your cycle for a school in year 2, you just need to complete this form, click continue with current identified student percentage, list the site, and submit that with your offline forms. For those of you in year 4, this is not a form that you need to submit with your renewal. If you have submitted it, that's fine, but it's not a required form for those in year 4. Okay, back to our questions. Possibly. Okay. Okay. The next question, does each school in the group need separate documentation, or can I do it district-wide? You can definitely give us documentation district-wide on your election spreadsheet if that's the way you want to go. All of your backup documentation, of course, will be by student. We require that you send in your enrollment list along with all of your direct certification and migrant lists. If you're doing your election spreadsheet district-wide, I'd ask that your enrollment list, if available, have the school name on it for each student or a school site where they are enrolled. That way in the future, if you have questions about ISPs for specific schools, we can get that information for you. The reason I say that is because in some instances, programs such as Title I or possibly CACFP summer programs may need a site-specific ISP to determine if a sponsor is eligible to participate. So, very long answer for a very short question, but if you have further questions on that, let me know. Next question is about the grace period. Can you explain the grace period? We still have to qualify, but I'm not sure I understand the value of the grace period. Does this allow us to ask for applications to make a better decision for next year? So unfortunately, if you decide to do the grace period, you are still not able to bring in applications. It's still a requirement that you don't collect applications from families. The benefit of the grace year is if you are in an area or a region where economic levels are rapidly changing or ever changing, you may continue with a grace year to sort of, I guess, feel out the possibilities for starting a new CEP cycle in the following year without disrupting the benefits that families are receiving of meals at no charge. It's definitely a consideration that you need to weigh financially, because certainly the gap in what you receive for reimbursement and the amount that that it's costing you will be greater. So there may have to be funding that is provided by the school or the nutrition program to cover that year. So I think the grace year is of benefit certainly to the families as they're still receiving the meals at no charge, but also to sponsors if they feel like in the next year they'd get an ISP that would allow them to participate in another cycle so that they don't have to do all that communication, have the administrative burden of taking applications again, et cetera. So that's what I would say for that. Okay. There's a question as to whether if a sponsor has submitted their documentations for CEP election already before the June 30th date, will we be validating before the deadline? So yes, now that administrative reviews are done and training travel is slowing down, we will begin validating the election information that has come in already. We won't wait to start validation until June 30th. So if you've already submitted your information, we'll begin looking at it most likely next week. And if we have questions, we'll certainly be in contact with you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and mute the line for just a second so I can pull some more questions together. We're back with you. Thank you. Earlier in the call, I discussed the categories of students that may be included in the identified student percentage. And I just wanted to review that. There was a question about it. So students that may be included in the ISP percentage include directly certified students. Those are students that you'll pull from the ODE DC match site. Also, homeless, foster, and migrant education students. That would be either via an email sent from the liaison for those programs or a list provided by the liaison. If they hand you a list, please have them sign it so we know that the liaison was provided the list. Most of the time they're going to email it, so you can just send it back to us as documentation. Also, there is a program, the Food Distribution Program for Indian Reservations. Students on that program may be included as part of the identified student percentage. Oftentimes, the documentation for that is a letter either from the tribe verifying that the student is on the program, or there may be a tribal liaison in some situations. Head Start and Even Start are programs that may be included, and you can provide the enrollment list or roster for those programs. And in some cases, in a small percentage of cases, administrator applications may be used. And I want to just caution you about administrator applications. I know with the House Bill 3454 and the inability to speak to students about unpaid debt. There have been some instances where administrators have thought it would be a good idea to do administrator applications if a student is not paying their debt. But administrator applications, as USDA requires, are a very rare occasion and can be completed really only in an instance where a student is in evident need and no other, there's been no other way to get them qualified through the parents or through other program organizations. So just a caution on that. But those are the categories that may be included in the ISP. Okay. Okay. How would we set up a school to be a CEP school if we know that they qualify based on the student population, but they're a new school and have no current year data? USDA does allow, if you're setting up a new school, to enroll at a later date. So if you have students enrolling, let's say, July and August, you can start building your enrollment list, and we can talk specifically about what the best date would be for that to do the enrollment list and then verify those students to be part of the ISP. You have to determine it before your first claiming period, but I would say get in contact with your child nutrition specialist or me, and we'll give you a little bit more information about new schools. Okay, does the backup information needed, or does it need to have all information that the DC has, or can it just be student's name and grade level? So if you're talking about the direct cert backup documentation, you can simply send us your direct cert download, the Excel sheet that you download from the website, and that will have all the information on it, definitely. For the other backup documentation, things like the list, the migrant list, homeless list, or if you're looking at extending direct cert benefits to certain students, we would need at least the student's name, student ID, SSID, which is the ID that ODE provides to all students in Oregon, and I would say address at least, so that we can verify the information based on what we've received. If you have further questions on that, let me know. If we didn't do a download for April 8th, is there a way to go back and or use a current download? I'm thinking this is talking about the direct certification download again. And you can simply go into the system, go ahead and download the April download, and just make sure that when you verify those students, if they were certified after April 8th, they are not included in the ISP. So it'll take a little bit more work to pull those out, but you can certainly go in and download April again and use that list. Okay, are there any instances where validation is not required? We are a contracted alternative school whereby we take no student applications but get student referrals from the larger school district. This is a little bit of a tough one. If you're doing CEP and you are a school that's taking students from other districts, you do need to get the backup documentation that the other districts are using to certify those students for benefits. So for instance, if they are using direct certification lists and your site does not have the capability to download direct cert lists, you will need to get copies of those lists from the districts where those students are enrolled or housed. If they have, you know, again, homeless or foster liaisons, you'll want to connect with the liaisons from those districts so that you can get that information. I would like to show you on our website, as we're talking about it, we have at the bottom under resources linked the migrant education program, the McKinney-Vento or homeless program, and the foster care program web pages. Each of those web pages has a link to district liaisons for all 3 programs, has their names, phone numbers, and email addresses, and so that you can easily get in contact with them. Okay, can we elect CEP, then redetermine next year to reestablish the CEP percentages if they seem to have increased over the year? The answer is yes. At no time are you locked in to a 4-year cycle. You may elect CEP with 1 percentage this year, and if you determine in the next year that you will get a better percentage, you can provide us your election documentation again and re-elect another 4-year cycle. If you determine to do that, if you elected this year, you would start a 4-year cycle. And if you figured out you had a better percentage next year, you just basically restart a 4-year cycle. So it's not a continuation of the cycle that you started this year. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, there's some clarification questions on the matching tool. When we use the matching tool, we download our direct certs from July through April 8th and not just the April 8th direct certs. There is some question about what to download on the direct certification webpage. You can actually download all months of direct certification. So if you go into the website and you, in the section where you click on the month you want to view or download, you'll start at July 2017, click on July, then scroll down to the bottom, hold the Shift key and click on April. That will allow you to download the entire year of direct certification, and you can utilize that list. One thing, if you are doing a match through Excel or you're doing your own type of match formula, just know that there will be duplications on that list because students may pop up in several months, so you'll want to make sure you pull duplicates. Another option for you through the direct certification site is the upload. The upload is a new feature this year. It allows you to take your enrollment list from whatever date you want. So for CEP, it would be April 2nd. Format it into the upload template, which is provided on the CEP webpage, and then take that and upload it into the direct certification system, and it will match directly to your enrollment. So only the students on that enrollment list will be matched in the algorithm. It's a nice system. We've heard from sponsors that have done it. I will tell you, it takes a little finagling to get the template right because of the algorithms, but once you do, we've heard that it definitely provides a good number and even an increased number of matches, and may prevent you from having to search the non-match list or the other options that we have for matching. So if you have the capability and would like to do that, I would say give it a try. Okay, next question. Could you talk a little bit about Title I funding and how CEP can benefit or not? The amount of funding received from Title I. It seems that administrators fear that they will be missing out on some Title I funding. This has definitely been a challenge and a pushback. I can only speak to it in general terms because I'm not an expert on the Title I funding. However, my understanding is that when you elect CEP, the Title I funding or the formula for determining what a school will get is based on the individual site ISP, which could be, if you have 45% ISP at the site, it would be that 45% times 1.6, and that's how the schools or the districts determine what funding goes to Title I. As far as the state calculation, I am not sure on it, but after the call, I will do some research, and when I send out the follow-up email with the questions and answers, I will have a much clearer and more eloquent answer to that. So apologies for not having a specific answer to it. I will say that those that have been on CEP and other sponsors may be able to talk more to this. I have not seen huge issues in Title I funding for those that have been on CEP. So it's a fear, but I don't think the fears are realized. Just a thought. For schools that are asking for household verification income forms, is there a template letter to give to families to present outside agencies for other discounts? Great question. So a little explanation on the question. As you know, as part of CEP, you cannot ask families to fill out free or reduced applications, but you can provide income survey or household income surveys that they can fill out and then qualify for other services, such as maybe discounts on Comcast or other programs that may provide discounts to free and reduced eligible families. Currently, we do not have a template letter to give to the families to present to those agencies for the discounts. However, it's something that I can look into if other states have them, and I can let you know about that. We do have templates for the survey itself, which are here on the CEP page. I will tell you that those are not updated for current income eligibility levels because we haven't received those yet. So, but we will once we receive them, and then you can have them fill out those statements. And I'll look into the letter templates as well. Okay. Oh, we have actually an answer to that question from another member of the call, and it is that the family could fill out the income survey and then actually turn that into the agency for the discount. So there's an option as well if they are willing to do that. So thank you very much for that. Okay. So I don't see any more questions right now. I'll pause for a second, grab a glass of water, and I'll be right back. So the last question says, would they need to fill out a household verification form every time they want to present it to someone or to an agency? My guess would be no. If the income is the same, it would possibly be that they would make a copy of it. But these are maybe a little bit beyond my knowledge or scope. So I don't see any other questions about CEP, and so I'll go ahead and wrap up the call. If you do have further questions, of course, you are always welcome to email me, call your child nutrition specialist. I've added my information to this last slide. I would like to let you know that ODE CNP fully understands, and we absolutely appreciate the amount of work and time that it takes to determine these ISP numbers, to research student eligibility, and to calculate the financial benefits or challenges in electing CEP. We also realize that all of you are enduring this burden because you're dedicated to providing healthy meals to as many students as you possibly can. And I want to personally acknowledge the work and effort that all of you are doing this year and every year for our kids. We have developed information and tools to assist you in your efforts, things like the upload, things like the ODE match tool. But I do realize that the only time that we really know if these tools help or hinder is when y'all try them in real life situations. And so if you are having issues with the ODE match tool, the DC site upload, or any of the other tools that we've created, please do not spend days fighting with these things. Just give us a call, connect with your child nutrition specialist, or connect with me directly, because we want to make sure that we can help or provide alternate options for you to get this information as quickly and easily as you can. I also want to give you a big thank you for joining me this morning on the call. My contact information, as I mentioned, is listed on this slide. I'm going to compile the questions and answers we discussed today, and anything that I was unable to answer or need to provide more clarity or further information for, I'll do that research and make sure it's part of that. I'll go ahead and email out the final questions and answers to y'all. If you would be so kind as to give me maybe a week to do that, and then look for those emails. Again, contact me at any time with any questions, or your child nutrition specialist. We will all be willing to help you. Finally, thank you to all of you for the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future. I hope you all have a beautiful day.